The green Daytona. You need diamond hands in order to play against the green Daytona and win. Let's get into it. So let's begin with the specifications and then we can get into the speculation because that's why you're here. Now, off with the dimensions. 40 millimeters case diameter. This is basically a Daytona. So 40 millimeters case diameter, 46.5 millimeters from lug to lug, and it's got a 12.2 millimeter thickness. Now it's also got a 20 millimeter lug width, but you don't care about that because this watch is probably never coming off the solid gold bracelet that it comes on. Now for the internals. The Rolex caliber 4130. Now the only thing you really care when it comes to this particular piece about the movement is probably the accuracy and the power reserve. So it's got an accuracy of +2, -2 in typical Rolex fashion, and it's got a power reserve of 72 hours. Now this is particularly funny to me because 72 is quite specific and it also says approximately 72 hours. And now if you take a look at the Black Bay chrono, they say approximately 70 hours. So Rolex just about had to one-up Tudor even in this, because they're the big brother. Now for the highlights of this watch. 18 karat solid yellow gold, case and bracelet. That's a lot of gold. And apart from that, we've got that bright green sunburst style, which is just fantastic under good light. Oh, and it also has 100 meters of water resistance for that one mad lad who decides to take it into the swimming pool. The three reasons why people want this watch. There are two primary reasons and one which is a combination of the two primary reasons. So the first one is because of the aesthetics. It looks pretty incredible. I really like it. I wouldn't own it or wear it because I'm not a big fan of precious metals that are showy. So white gold is kind of okay because it looks like steel to me. But in general, I don't care for precious metals on a watch. But I can still appreciate the aesthetics of this piece and how ostentatious it is and flashy and good looking. I do think it's a stunner of a piece with an unparalleled wrist presence. You really don't see this much wrist presence unless you go solid precious metals or maybe a Richard Mille. The second reason, hype and value inflation. Everyone wants into the next big thing before it happens. That is a massive driver for the hype behind this piece. You can also thank John Mayer for driving the massive appreciation of this watch. Now the third reason, like I mentioned, a combination of both reasons why people want this watch, at least in terms of the retail buyer, the person that actually will wear this watch, he will consider both of these two reasons. Now, I don't exactly know who would consider just reason one and not the value, but I could see a watch dealer just considering it for the value. So a retail customer who's gonna wear this piece would think about both. In person, the first thing anyone notices about this watch is the weight of it. Now, it's no surprise that gold's heavier than stainless steel, but it is still something that really comes to mind the first time you pick this up. The tactility of the entire thing. That's obviously second to the aesthetics, but you can see the aesthetics by looking at it on video or in pictures. But when you actually hold it, you're like, okay, I get this. This is something different. It actually feels a bit more special, apart from just looking stunning. And of course, gold is extremely lustrous in person, and that sunburst style also adds to that effect. Although I would assume that if someone actually wore this watch daily for a few years, it would get extremely scuffed up and dented quite quickly. That's because the Young's modulus of gold is far lower than that of stainless steel. So that's essentially the resistance to deformation, dents and dings on the watch and scuffs. Those are going to be a lot more apparent really quickly if you actually wore this piece on a daily basis. Now onto the dial. Like I mentioned, the rich sunburst green. In really good lighting, you notice that sunburst effect, and it's a sort of a thick, bright green. Rolex calls it a bright green, but that's a bit ambiguous because in lower lighting settings, it looks like a dark green, and obviously you don't see that sunburst effect, so it looks kind of muted, but it's still a very pleasant color. Now, speaking from a user perspective, if I would own this watch, I would be always really ginger and careful with the crown threads and the pusher threads, because gold is obviously weaker than stainless steel for plastic deformation, and if you don't really take care when you unscrew the crown or unscrew the pushers and perhaps you over tighten it, I would assume that it would be more likely to break than the comparative stainless steel version of the Daytona. So I would be really ginger every time I use the crown or unscrew the crown. So now let's get into the speculation, the reason you probably clicked this title. Now I'd like to give a quick plug to Ken Watches, as they're the ones who let me get a hands-on with this piece and most of the new watches on the channel. So they're a watch dealer in Hong Kong and they do ship worldwide, so do check them out at kenwatches.com if you want some really cool pieces. So short recap, everyone bet on the green Daytona being discontinued by Rolex at the new releases this year on April 7th. But Rolex said no, they didn't discontinue the watch, and so all the people that were hedging their bets on this going away paid a lot of money in the week prior to the releases. Some paid in excess of $95,000, close to $100,000 for this watch. It's mostly watch dealers because this is their livelihood and the value of the watch means more profit. So it makes sense that people are paying a lot more under the pretext that this would be discontinued and they could then make a killing on it. But lo and behold, that did not happen. So we're in a phase of extreme volatility now, and no one really knows what the actual going price for this watch is because no one wants to buy it. There isn't a going price because it's not selling and it's not being bought. Those who bought it still have it, and some of them did liquidate it for a massive loss because they couldn't hold that much capital in a watch. And that's very unfortunate. But then again, that's also why there's a massive volatility, because some people have to get rid of them no matter what the cost. So some people can get them at a lot less, whereas others are willing to hold them. So you see a range from 70,000 US dollars all the way to 110,000 US dollars. And that's frankly quite ridiculous for even a gold watch. Another thing you got to keep in mind is the vast majority of green Daytona sales have been between dealers. Now the dealer watch market is different to the retail watch market. This is because the hype usually is generated by dealers and the majority of sales are between dealer to dealer. So it's quite odd. You would naturally assume that a dealer buys a watch to sell it to a customer and make a small amount on that. But in this case, a dealer sometimes will source a watch for another dealer, which is very common within the gray market. So they would still make a lot of money selling it to that next dealer. And that next dealer could do the same to another dealer. And this way, the prices are extremely crazy within the dealer market itself. And that is then reflected into the entire watch market. There are very few people that get this watch at retail from the authorized dealer. And I think a lot of the retail customers do end up giving it to dealers. And then there's this huge cycle within the dealer market itself. And it's very odd and very volatile. And at this point, no one really knows what the exact going price of the green Daytona is or should be. And also another thing, within the gray watch market, it really matters which month your card is stamped at. So the sale of the watch. So the newer ones obviously go for the top dollar and the older ones go for less. So everyone hoarding the previous watches from, let's say, March, Feb, Jan, they will go less than the watches that have a card stamped in April. Now, once we get into May quite soon, this would be the same and it would apply to May. So that's another aspect of why prices can be even more volatile within an already volatile market. So now I actually think that there are a very few number of retail customers or end users that are buying this watch to wear and keep in their collection at the gray market prices. There are some people buying this watch at retail, the few lucky ones, and they will keep it forever because they're watch collectors, watch enthusiasts, and it's going up anyway, so they want the watch essentially. But there are very few people that are actually buying it at the gray market price for themselves. Mostly the gray market prices dictate a lot of what dealers are paying other dealers for the watch. So I just wanted to highlight this aspect of the watch market, especially when it comes to the green Daytona, because I found it very fascinating to see that the market of a watch is not necessarily accurate when it comes to the end consumer, that is the retail buyer. So us watch enthusiasts, you've really got to think about what the end game is in terms of within the dealer market, and that is heavily influential inside the entire gray market spectrum. I thought this was an interesting topic. I hope you liked it. Let me know what you think about this. Perhaps you know better. Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Cheers.